Welcome to the Fancy Think. I'm Jared Quartermansion. Today we are going to be doing comics versus prose, number 9. Yeah, all right. So we're getting through this series, and by now you guys should know if you've been following along with this series. The verses that I put in there isn't actually a conflicting thing like verses may sound like. It's actually a comparison thing. So. Um, Assassin's Apprentice 2, number 3, which is the 9th issue in the whole series, adapting Robin Hobb's Assassin's Apprentice, book 1 in the Farseer trilogy. And as you can tell by this cover here, it's a beautiful cover with Fitz walking down the beach with his friend, friend who's a girl. And so it's very calm, complacent. It's a beautiful scenery. You get the nice beautiful blue ocean and the colors, and I think this kind of represents the tone and feel of this portion of the book and in this portion of the series. This is kind of like the calm before the storm. And so I want to be sure, though, to tell you that plenty happens in here. It's not calm as in nothing happening. Calm. It's calm as in there's no usually stressful events. Conflict wise. So let's get into it. And you'll see what I mean here. Where we left off. We left off right at the end of chapter 10 in the book, and so we're starting right at the chapter 11 here. But there was in the little each chapter has a little epigraph, and in the epigraph in this one, which is Fitz writing his story from far in the future, and in the epigraph of this one, there is the mention of the Pocked Man and all the legends and stories around the Pocked Man that we actually read about in last issue. But because I didn't read ahead in the book, I missed that from last issue. And these legends of the Pocked Man being the harbinger of death and disease was in the epigraph of chapter 11, which is not in this issue. That was in the previous issue. Just so we're clear here. And then there's quite a bit of exposition at the beginning of chapter 11 that they kind of skip over so that we can get right into this next issue of issue 3 of Assassin's Apprentice 2. All right. So we start right off the bat with a bunch of exposition and expository boxes, narrative boxes that pretty much mirror what goes on in the first couple pages in this chapter, and it's telling us what's going on around where Fitz is not at, around the rest of the kingdom, the rest of the duchy, or whatever, wherever they are. And you can see that's reflected in the coloring here by these reddish, brownish, sepia tones, that it's happening somewhere else. It's not happening around Fitz. Whenever we have Fitz involved in the story of the conversations and stuff like that, it's more natural lighting, more of what you would see in a natural world, natural setting type of lighting. So right after that, we go into the next page, and it goes right into the dialogue between Shade and Fitz. And I like what they're doing here because they're still talking about what's happening around the kingdom before we get an exposition. Now it goes into dialogue as if they were discussing it all along, which is pretty cool. And then the artwork does a nice job of showing the conversation in the dialogue boxes while also showing what Fitz is doing. He's tending to the fire, and he's got coals in there and stuff, and that is described in the book, and the artwork shows what is being described in the book very nicely. Um, and so we go to the next page, um, where once again Shade is telling Fitz a little bit of history, and that history is reflected in these kind of grayish black and white tones behind Shade as he's telling the story. So I like how they did that too, because you really gotta look and focus in on that artwork to see what's going on and see how that stuff is portrayed. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. Uh, got some tea here. Keep going. Yeah. Nice. All right. So as we carry on, um, we the dialogue is pretty much taken right from the book. So all those dialogue boxes you saw uh, were were just pretty much word for word. And once again, on the next page, Shade is detailing the past about when he's talking to the king, and so the past is personified by these non-colored artwork boxes. And as you can see, the artwork, as always, by Ryan Kelly is just spectacular. And these pages, these 4 pages right in a row, um, pretty much detail word for word what's going on in the novel for the next 2 or 3 pages here. 2 pages, yes. And so we get to a point where Fitz is returning to his lessons, and I like how the some of the artwork is explaining what's going on in the book here. We see uh, this one panel here where Fitz is trying to reach out to find out where Shade is. He's trying to use his magical little talent there to find out where Shade is, and Burek comes up behind him and slaps him on the head. He says, "Cut it out! I know what you're doing." Even though he didn't quite know what he was doing, he thought there was some animals involved. Um, but it's very well done in the book. Like in the book, she describes the slap to the back of the head and stuff like that in more detail. But in the picture, we kind of just get all those words right into that one panel there, and so that was very well done. The next sections is when he is on the beach with Molly, which is portrayed in the cover here. And so I found these next sections interesting. It covered one, two, three pages in the book, and there's like 2 pages in the comic, and I thought it was broken down very well and really displayed what was going on in the book, except for one difference I noted was in the book, the tone of the character's speech to me seemed a little bit harsher when they were arguing as it did in the comic. So I found that very interesting, as the comic seems to portray them, um, and maybe it's because of the proximity of the characters, and you're feeling a little bit more warmth with the colors and how the characters are drawn together like that. And so maybe that's just my own perception I'm putting into the prose when I was reading it in the novel. And so maybe it just seems more contentious because my own head is picturing them more contentious for some reason. So I thought that if the artwork And that's just the thing about adaptations is everybody has their own interpretation of what's going on when you're reading. Everybody does, not just artists and adapters. Everybody has their own perceptions of how they take in the words, and that's all mixed in with your own experiences and how you we relate to the words. And so I read the comic first, so I kind of knew it was coming, but I still perceived it as a bit more contentious in the novel than I did in the comic. So that's very interesting. That's how our minds work. Moving on from the scenes, we get to the part where Fitz is eventually going to meet somebody quite important in his life. We see some panels of Fitz doing some mundane things in the night with animals and horses. He's coming back to keep, and he's notices a horse that's not normally there, and he runs into a woman in the kitchen. Um, I thought that was pretty well done in sequence, and uh, really captured the way that it's laid out on the page as it is in the book here. The next, let's see. One thing I noticed here was there was a lot of explanation in this book for one little panel with no words. So I wonder if you could study that panel and figure out what's going on between those two people just by the way everything looks. And it's really interesting because in the book, you have, um, you have them seated, juggling. He's juggling his food. He's got his mug. Her eyes are on him. Her own food is remaining ignored, and he's ducking his head to avoid her gaze and eating quickly. And so, that's everything that's happening in that panel. Um, and she sort of watched him with an observation. And he couldn't think of anything to say, and she wasn't being rude about it. And and so it just kept going on and on. That description of their meeting, it kept going on and on in that book. And I thought that artwork in that panel just kind of said it all. Really, it kind of said um, what what was happening in there. And it was, admittedly, it was nice to get the explanation of everything later on when I read the book afterwards, after reading this. But it was it was very, very cool how they pulled that off, because you are adapting a story into a format that needs room. It needs room for artwork. It needs room to breathe, and so that is how you do it, right there. All right. So the end of that page um, is the end of chapter 11 in the book. Then we go into chapter 12. There is another epigraph in here, which is not, the information in there is not related into the comic. And so most of these epigraphs talk about Red Ship Raiders and, stuff that happens far away with the Outislanders and the Six Duchies. So that is not, uh, not the point of view that this adaptation wants to give. In chapter 12, there's one line that was on the last page in the comic that said, he'll see the lady twice more. But then it goes right into what the events of chapter 12. One thing I noticed that in all the descriptions, um, you know, it's one thing to read a description in a book that tells you that it's nighttime, you know, and everybody knows what nighttime is, and you just read on. But then you read it in the comic, and it shows you nighttime. You know, that dark coloring, almost darkish blue or whatever to represent night. Um, that makes you really feel the nighttime and how it's going. And so, um, one little section I noticed here was that the artwork did a great job here. He says, "I managed a bow, and when I succeeded, when I succeeded, I distinguished myself by straightening up with a flourish." And I thought the artwork did a great job of doing a comedic bow right there. I think that's pretty funny on the artist's part. And no, I think I'm repeating myself on these videos by saying how wonderful the artwork is, but it's that good. So you got to give it its due. Um, and so there was very little changes in dialogue. There was one interesting change I thought where in the book, um, when they meet later in the castle and she's in more formal clothing and he's uh, up at dawn the next day after his night of binging, um, he has the same shirt on. And in the book, she says, "Change your shirt," like a command, you know. And in the comic, they change it to, "You need to change your shirt." And I was kind of curious at that change in dialogue. Did they need, did they need the space in the thought bubble in the comic? Did they need to fill it up? What was the point of putting in "you need to change your shirt" and rather than just change your shirt? And I guess the implication there is that the word "need" implies that there's something wrong with the shirt, rather than just change your shirt is I want you to change it because I just want you to change it because I don't like it or something like that. But in this case, adding the words "you need to" implies that there's something actually wrong with the shirt. And you could infer that by the previous pages by the fact that he was drunk and he was outside. And so the shirt itself may be not in good condition. So that was an interesting change I threw in there, lady. Um, and it goes word for word pretty much for the rest of um, the book here. They discuss their his upbringing, and she then I like how they displayed in a flurry of skirts. She hastens off down the hallway. I like how that is displayed in the bottom here. The flurry of skirts just hastening away. Very cool. Very good artwork. And then we go back to some dialogue between Burek and Fitz. And that, of course, is when Fitz finds out that the woman he's been dealing with is the lady Patience, his father's wife, his stepmother, basically. So, very interesting stuff here. Good dialogue. The art reflects it perfectly. Once again, Burek is remembering in a encounter with the lady Patience when she was younger and he was younger. And that's, of course, is back to that history gray or history sepia tone, I guess, that has been consistent throughout this series. All right, so finally he's talking to Shade again. And here is like, okay, so to this point, I think you can see what I mean by, even though there was some interesting dialogue, there's interesting little personal complications and stuff like that this kind of was a very calm issue. It was calm, it was relaxing. You kind of just got into it. There's some dialogue. You're learning a little bit about Fitz, a little bit about um, uh, the people he's interacting with. He interacts with Shade, he interacts with Molly, he interacts with Björk, he interacts with the new lady Patience. Um, And so then we finally get to the last page where some, the important information is going to come out that's going to lead us into the rest of the story and the rest of the series, really, because it is on this last page that we find out that Fitz is to be trained in the skill, in his magic skill, formally. That we've been waiting for. We've been waiting for this, really. And so, here we go. There was one section of artwork which I thought was funny in the book. Right there. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Uh, it says, "I was dizzied," and you see the eyeballs with the pupils, because he's learning right then that he's going to be trained formally, um, and have a appropriate education for a prince. So it's something that all of us should enjoy these days, right? All right. So this issue ends with him finding out he's going to be trained in the skill, and it ends right in the middle of chapter 12. And so it is at this point that, I kind of suspected before, but I fully realize now that Assassin's Apprentice 2, which ends at issue 6, there's only 3 more issues in this, is no way going to cover the rest of this book. We're only halfway through the book. And that, of course, leads me to believe that there's going to be an Assassin's Apprentice 3 at some point in the future. Hopefully, and I have a feeling, but based upon our progress here, I have a feeling that will finish off this novel. So I don't know whether to look forward to that or not. Um, yeah, it's taken me. These are just a delight. They're a treat. They're so fun. They're fun to read, and they've been fun to compare to the book. But on the other hand, I kind of want to finish this book off. uh, Patience. Patience. That's a sign. The lady Patience showed up in this book. So I'm going to have patience to before I just run off and finish that book. And so, with that all said, I hope you liked this little comparison. And if you did, like and subscribe below. And until next time, be good to each other. Thank you.